Hello, everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well. And today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees the brand new release of Wolfman, the official, unofficial Dark Universe rebooted. Apparently, the Dark Universe that they had tried to start up several years ago with films like The Mummy starring Tom Cruise, amongst many other films that they had planned, was scrapped. And now, ever since the release of The Invisible Man, apparently the director of that film has now been given a green light to basically do his own little monsterverse, his own little dark universe style of movies, I guess. So Wolfman is now going to be coming out from Universal/Blumhouse and not expected to have a huge opening weekend domestically. It's kind of like what we've been seeing now for the entire month of January. This is the place, of course, where films go to die, where especially the box office for films goes to die. But even though Wolfman is not expected to do very well, it is looking like Mufasa is going to be holding very strong and is going to be, once again, getting that much closer to catching up with the box office for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And I do think right now, with where the film currently is pacing, Mufasa's domestic has a very good chance of being able to catch up and surpass that of the domestic of Sonic, which after the massive improvement or the massive advantage that Sonic had after its opening weekend is just impressive, no matter how you spin it one way or the other. I speak of a person as a person that hated Mufasa. I have no skin in this game other than just telling you the numbers and being honest with you about these numbers. And for some reason, some people are just not really happy about that. Again, I wish I could be telling you that Mufasa was doing awful. I wish I could be telling you that Mufasa was a massive, catastrophic failure. And in many ways, it still very much is a catastrophic failure, especially in comparison to the 2019 release. This film is not anywhere close to the entirety of the box office for that 2019 film release, but the fact still remains that the domestic box office is doing better than what it should have after its opening weekend, and it is likely going to end better than Sonic. So if Sonic is going to be called a success by many, why not this movie? And again, I know that the big difference, of course, is the budgets, right? A massive, massive, massive budget for Mufasa and obviously a massive marketing campaign for Mufasa. But guess what? Sonic is also not that much of a slouch in that area either. And so we'll talk about that. We'll see the updates for both of those films and a plethora of others. But before going any further, let's go ahead and just dive into the chart itself. Wolfman is expected to make $13.2 million in the 3-day because it is the MLK weekend and really not a whole lot really coming out of this. It's going to be a pretty slow weekend overall with only really one major new, couple new releases here, one being Wolfman and the other one being One of Them Days, which is your standard, sorry, I forgot to turn my alarm off there, which is your standard MLK weekend movie fare, I guess you could say. And I guess if you look into the movie, you'll see why. But not expected to do very well there either. But Wolfman, $13.2 million in 3 days, $15 million over the 4-day weekend. Whereas Mufasa is expected to take that number 2 spot once again. So Mufasa, $10 million, only dropping 30% is the current projection, making it $14 million over the 4 days. And yeah, that's right. Mufasa, which has now been out for several weeks, has a potential chance to even make more than the new film Wolfman. And this far out from your initial release, if you're making the number 1 spot or even the number 2 spot this far out, that is just darn impressive no matter how you try to spin it. $14 million over 4 days, meaning its total domestic is expected to be around $206.8 million. Now you compare that to the 4-day for Sonic the Hedgehog 3's $9.5 million, which is actually expected to be less than Den of Thieves 2. So Den of Thieves 2, the sequel to a movie that no one even knew existed in the first place, $8.4 million there. Sonic the Hedgehog 3, if it was doing better financially, should definitely be beating Den of Thieves 2. Now, for all we know, these are just projections. We could see that ultimately change in the long run. But let's just say Sonic the Hedgehog 3 box office is doing just fine. It's doing just fine for its release. It's doing just fine for it as initial release. But I think that some people are just kind of going a little bit too crazy with calling this a huge box office win, a huge box office success for this movie. It's a good movie as far as overall making its money back, making profit. That's a good thing. But it is not going to be the biggest moneymaker in actual comparison to its budget. And even just in comparison to the franchise, it's not really increasing the overall box office in a way that is that impressive. It's doing what it should be doing, right? Which means making its money back, making more than the other releases have been. But let's just say it's far removed from a franchise like John Wick, the John Wick franchise, which doubled its overall box office with every subsequent release, and with the most recent one actually still increased it by about $100 million or so, not doubling the previous amount, which is where we're seeing John Wick actually slowing down quite a bit. Basically, that's what I'm saying is going on with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. It's seeing very consistent improvements, but nothing to a drastic measure. So it's still very much justified to have a Sonic 4, and that's going to happen, and it's going to continue to make marginal and be marginally successful box office-wise. If anyone's going to try to bring up merchandising or anything like that, that's not really my purview. I focus just on the box office numbers here. So it's doing fine. It's doing just fine. It's amazing how people get offended when I say a movie is doing just fine. It's like, oh, you're saying it's a catastrophe. I'm not saying that at all. Calm down. Anyway, let's go over to Box Office Pro, which has a very similar outlook here. So Wolfman expected to make $15 to $20 million over the 4-day frame. Den of Thieves is expected for them to also get into that number 2 spot, $6 to $8 million there. And Mufasa the Lion King expected to make $5 to $7 million. So it is looking like that is their 3-day performance. So interesting metric being added there. Mufasa is expected to get the number 3 spot, though, making $5 to $7 million. And so again, we have some discrepancies here between these different charts. Going over to Box Office Reports, they also have Wolfman around $17 million. This is a 4-day prediction. Mufasa at 14.3, so not as close of a prediction there. One of them days getting the number 3 spot in this situation of $12 million. Den of Thieves 2, $10.2 million. And Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the number 5 spot at $9.7 million. So again, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is dropping off quite a bit. Again, 15% drop is a pretty strong hold, so it's going to be interesting to see which one is actually correct. Obviously, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, 36% drop in the 3-day numbers, at least according to the box office theory numbers there. We will have a better idea and a better metric of this, of course, as days go by. Let's go over to the Chauncey who love Chauncey on OMB Reviews. And as you can see, $25 million is the budget being reported for the Wolfman movie. So it needs to make about $62.5 to about $75 million to break even, as most films today have to break even points closer to 3 times their budget versus 2.5 times their budget. It really depends on where the movie is making money. If you make more money international, then your break even becomes that much higher because you get a lot less return on investment for those actual numbers. And so, again, starting off with 15 to 17 million domestic is not the worst in the world, but that's still a far cry from closer to $75 million that your film needs to make to actually break even. Only time will tell whether it's going to be able to do that. If it is not able to do that, it'll be a very small box office failure. So again, it is what it is at this point in time. Den of Thieves is currently $47 million or so in the red, so it's not really expected to do that much money and probably will not make its money back. But again, similar to what I think will happen with Wolfman, it'll probably be one of those movies that ends up being a small box office flop. Baby Girl also in a similar category there. The Fire Inside also in the same category. Nosferatu still, at least as the recording of this video, has not made its money back, but probably will by the end of this weekend if I had to guess. It was not really in the discussion there. Only $3.9 million expected for this weekend, but it's one of those movies that is making money as the release continues, as the time goes on. And so I do suspect that it will continue to get very close and, again, break even, make some profits in addition to that. Complete Unknown, still a box office flop by all metrics. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 only has made $3.1 million in net profits. And again, this film is going to have more than doubled its box office over the first 2 weeks, or compared to the first 2 weeks. But a big part of that is because of the delayed international releases there. So this movie's having, again, a fine release, but really nothing to write home about in comparison to the other 2 Sonic movies and just a comparison to other franchise films that have even come out just this past year. Mufasa at $545 million is, again, pacing pretty well here. $54 million in the red. Yeah, I mentioned this before. The chance of this film to break even based off of the numbers that we have available to us is actually looking a lot better every single day. So this film is legging out quite a bit. And I think that the domestic numbers for this movie doing better than expected will definitely have a huge impact on that. Now, will the film make money? If it does, it's going to be barely any. So that's still going to be a pretty, massive catastrophic failure in comparison to the previous Lion King, quote, live action animated movie. But again, I think it's doing a lot better than what people expected, and there's no way Sonic 3 is ever going to hope to catch up to the worldwide numbers here. And as I mentioned before, I think there's a strong chance that Mufasa ends up with a stronger domestic total by the end of its release as well. We also have War of the Rohirrim just not doing much of anything. Kraven the Hunter, still a massive flop. Y2K, etc. Moana 2, I think that this could be the weekend that Moana 2 is able to break $1 billion worldwide. If we go back to the charting, right, Moana is not expected to do a whole lot of money, but $5.9 million would be just about enough, right, with any international numbers that get reported this weekend to put it over the edge. So if it's not by this weekend, it'll be sometime next week, right? Obviously, the weekday numbers for this film and a lot of the films on this chart have slowed down quite a bit, and that is expected, again, in the month of January, and with all the holidays being now over. Gladiator 2, even though it's done better down the stretch, is definitely a flop. Again, even its percentage base is still just not all that good, but right now, those are the numbers as they stand. Wicked at almost $700 million. This film probably going to be edging out between 7 and 750 million when everything is said and done, which again, on paper is actually pretty darn good. It means you're doing much better compared to your first 2 weeks, but also, right, a decent amount of profit. Nothing to write home about, but definitely not a flop like many people have, I think, been trying to falsely put forward. So those are the numbers as they stand. What are y'all's thoughts? Do you plan on seeing The Wolfman? Do you think it's going to be any good? Do you think it's going to make its money back? I have some doubts if the numbers end up holding the way that they are. I've heard some pretty mixed reviews about the movie. I again, from people I trust like Jeremy Johns, he has not really seemed to be that high on it. So I don't think it's going to be that word of mouth, campaign just doing really, really well down the stretch, or just really having that massive, viral type of release. But it is also the only real new release coming out this weekend. I don't even have the other new film, One of Them Days, on here because it's just not looking like it's going to do that much of anything. And typically with these movies, it's harder to find a budget for. We'll go ahead and look at this in real time, just so that way we get an idea. Try and keep myself honest here. So yeah, this is the other film, $14 million budget. We actually do have a budget here for this movie. And yeah, that's not going to be enough. That's not going to be enough money to do much of anything with at this point. So I'll put that into the chart as well. But let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, allow that fire button over, and honestly smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Friday, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illick and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribe Star people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.